Hello, Jesse. You are up next, sir. Hello.
Hey Bart, how's it going?
How's it going, Jesse?
Hey, good. I know you are too humble to brag on yourself, but I just wanted to say I was one of those lurkers on YouTube for about a year and was thinking about subscribing and definitely have not regretted it since doing so. So anybody in my situation, hopefully they take the plunge because it's taken my game to another level. And so I appreciate what you do.
Wow, that's awesome. I really appreciate that. I will say, and I literally never do this. I had gone just on that topic with I was so confident. So when I do an interview, I talk about like I did the Jungleman interview. When I do an interview, I know whether I'm giving the interview, sometimes I'm interviewing somebody or somebody's interviewing me. I know generally like if it went well, but a lot of times you don't know how well or if it didn't go. Like some spots were slow until you watch it back. So when I did the interview, I actually recorded the audio locally, and then I listened back to it, and then I was like, wow. This is me saying to myself, I did really well in that interview. I came off really well. And then other people, unsolicited, texted me and were like, wow, you sounded really good in that Jungleman interview. And then I read some of the comments. Some guy was like, I've never been a Bart Hansen fan, but he was good in this interview. I was just actually kind of amazed by the fact that Jungleman was kind of didn't know about like live rakes and like live drops, and he was kind of challenging me as to like, why does the casino have these drops? And I'm like, because they're trying to make the most amount of money possible. He didn't believe me. You know what I'm saying? Like he didn't actually believe that they would just up the drop and up the rake like over and over again. I thought it was quite funny, but anyways, I digress. All right, Jesse, where are you playing out of?
Yeah, playing out of Hollywood, just outside of Kansas City in Kansas.
Is that the race? Is that a racetrack?
Yeah, it's on turn 2 of the racetrack. Yep.
I've played there. I'm a big fan of Kansas City. All right, so Kansas City, what is it? Ameristad is over there too, right?
Yeah. Well, Harrah's is the only other poker room. It's across the river. It's on the Missouri side.
Was this place used to be called Ameristad or something?
Ameristar is.
Ameristar.
Yeah, it's over on the Missouri side. It doesn't do poker anymore.
Oh, okay. Oh, it doesn't get poker anymore. All right. What's the size of the game here?
Yeah, it's a 1-3 match the stack, and
nice.
This one actually it has button straddled to 6, so we'll be dealing with that.
And how deep are you?
We're 1300 effective. That's the villain stack.
That's a great setup. 1-3 match stack with basically 1-3-6. The only thing I don't like about it is the button straddle, but whatever, we'll take it. 1-3-6 with 1300 effective. And again, as I said, they just started doing this setup a little bit here in New Hampshire at Gate City, which is the old Boston Billiards, and then I saw them doing it at Chasers too. I haven't gotten up there to Nashua to play this match, but it's nice to see. So 1-3-6 on the button, 1300 effective. Okay.
Yeah, so actually I'm in the small blind, but the button had the straddle, so I'm to the immediate left of the button. So I'm first to act.
You're in the small blind.
I'm in the small blind.
Okay.
And so I've got ace of clubs, king of spades. And so I go ahead and raise it up to 25.
Oh, I remember this hand, actually. This is a funny one. This is a funny one, and anybody who is a CLP subscriber will sort of know what I'm talking about. I think it was on one of the podcasts. I actually spoke of a scenario where this might actually happen, and this is actually the scenario where it actually happened in real life. This was several weeks ago. All right, so here in the small blind with ace of clubs, king of spades. Okay.
Yeah, I listened to a lot of your live call-ins, Bart. So yeah, you were going through my head on this one for sure.
Okay.
So it folds around to the cutoff, who calls, and that's it. We're heads up.
How much did you raise it again? I'm sorry.
The 25.
All right, so small blind, hero small blind. This is like the ultimate under the gun, right? Because if you're playing 9-handed, you're first. And I kind of discussed sometimes, like it's weird though, because like you're in for so little. Sometimes I wonder, I guess I think where it might actually make sense is if you were actually in the big blind tier where it's 1-3-6, if you sometimes completed instead of raised with your entire range, and then had some limp raises in because like you're priced to complete and people think they're just going to ISO you, and you might have some limp raises, limp calls, limp folds from up front. In the first position, it just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense because you're only in for 1, right? So it's not like you're going to complete for 5 because you're in for 1. So I think that more works if you were in the big blind when you're in a button straddle type of situation. So you go to 25 from the small blind, and the cutoff only calls, right?
Correct. Yep,
Straddle on the button folds.
Yes.
All
so
right.
we're heads up.
So 50, 56, was it right around $60, something like that?
Yeah, with the rake, it'll be around 50, just a touch over. Yep.
All right. So I'm going to put 55. Okay.
All right. And the flop is king of diamonds, 7 of clubs, 5 of clubs.
King of diamonds, 7 of clubs, 5 of clubs. Your heads up out of position against the cutoff, who cold called at 1300 effective. Okay.
Yeah. So I let out for $50.
So hero bets almost the size of the pot.
Yep.
Hero bets 50. You have ace of clubs, king of spades. So you have the king. It's a 2 flush type of board. I might go just a tad smaller. It would be, sometimes when people call on this show and they talk about like different sort of sizes, and I'm like, well, if a guy just, if you bet 20 here and you're going to get the same calling frequency as 40, why are you betting 20? Here you bet 50. This one's a little bit different though, because if you go 50 here and a guy has a pair that's not a king and he doesn't have a club, I don't know how much defending he's going to do to a full pot size bet. You block the king, right? You have the ace of clubs. Like it would kind of suck if a guy folded like red 8s here, if you went so large, or like red 6s or something like that. You're never going to get, any type of like backdoor types of floats here. Like you're not going to call Jack 10 of diamonds here to 50. That's why I might go a little bit on the kind of on the smaller side. Nate's saying normally I'm all about going large. Anyways, that's just me subtly like 30 to 35. All right, so you go 50. I don't think it's a huge thing. Just
Yeah, no, I'm interested in what you said about that. So I think that's good insight, because I mean, like a 2 Broadway board, obviously we can go big.
Sure.
Like you talk about, the 30 or the 50 is going to get called the same, but obviously he's got the flush draw out there, a little bit connected down low. But as you said, probably want to go a little bit smaller to keep some of those pocket pairs that are definitely in his range in.
Yeah.
But the cutoff goes in calls.
Pretty quickly?
Yeah, pretty quickly.
All right, so cutoff calls. What's the deal with this guy?
So he had just sat down. I just doubled him up on a cooler type thing. So didn't really have much info on him. A younger guy, probably in his mid 30s, lower to mid 30s. Seemed competent, but I didn't really have many reads. He had not been there too long.
All right, so 50 and a call. So now we are at 155. Okay.
Yep, and the turn is the 4 of clubs.
Turns to 4 of clubs. Hero with ace of clubs, king of spades, king of diamonds, 7 of clubs, 5 of clubs, 4 of clubs. So front door flush comes in. King X of clubs is available, as is, some other Broadway types of clubs, and, obviously like suited connectors. The thing that I would say, as I always point out, is the fact that you hold the ace of clubs will actually cut down the number of combinations of flushes by quite a lot from your villain. Usually we talk about this when like the ace appears. Like if you were betting here and like you didn't have the ace of clubs and it was like king 7, 5, 7 of clubs, 5 of clubs. And now all of a sudden the ace of clubs appears. Now that actually cuts down. That's like a lot better club for you to have, to not have a flush, for it to come than like a low club. And that's because, count the number of like ace X of clubs that someone's going to play pre to a raise. It could be like from like ace deuce through like ace 10 through ace jack as a flat call, but they're only playing like king, queen, king, jack, king 10, queen, jack, queen 10, jack 10, and maybe like some suited connectors. So it cuts, when the ace is accounted for, here it's accounted for in your hand, it cuts down on the flushes a lot. The other thing too is that when you have the ace of clubs, you're not really going to get raised here a lot anyway. So I would just tend to continue to bet, I think, for those reasons here.
Yeah, that's what I did. I bet 125.
So hero bets 125. Well, I mean, the fact that you bet so large on the flop and got called, even though you have a king, usually he's going to lend, like I said, the opponent to actually having something. So I don't mind this type of sizing here on turn. I thought maybe it was a little bit too large on the flop, but once he calls, like if you had a bluff, this would be burning money, right? Yeah. But you have value and you have the ace of clubs. So you bet 125, okay?
Yeah, and the cutoff calls. He actually tanked a little bit here and thought about it, but then he called.
All right, so it's 405, right?
That's right.
405 to the river. Obviously, he could have a small flush, maybe, right? He could. I mean, there's a lot of hands he can still have here that have you beat. He could have turned a small flush. He could be like slow playing a set that now he's not going to raise. He could. I mean, but he could also have King X here too. I mean, you know, when you open from the very, I mean, you're literally, this is the tightest configuration in all of No Limit Hold'em with a button straddle and you're opening in the small blind. Plus, he's in the cutoff and he's actually kind of even more, probably more incentivized to play a 3-bet here to get the guy behind him out. He's really not supposed to be calling with like King, Queen, King, Jack, King 10 off here, but you will find that. If he's not calling with the offsuit broadways, then you got to really look and say, well, how many, you know, what kind of hands can this guy have? If it's only King X suited, right? Because you've got a spade. This is where it comes into play too, right? You got a spade in your hand. The diamond is on the board. So any King X of clubs, right? You're losing to. So now you're only really left with like King X of hearts holdings. This is only if he only plays King X suited. So King Queen suited, King Jack suited, King 10 suited. That's only like 3 combos. So depending on how you think he might structure pre-flop, it's starting to get a little bit, you can start to get a little bit thin here. Pot's 405. All right, let's go to the river.
Yeah, and the river comes the card, the 6 of clubs.
Wow. So the river here is the 6 of clubs. And I say wow because the board reads King of diamonds, 7 of clubs, 5 of clubs, 4 of clubs, 6 of clubs. So 4, 5, 6, 7. All clubs, right? So what nut do you hold there, Jesse?
The third nut, because obviously the 8 of clubs beats me, and then the 3 of clubs beats me.
Yes, the 3, the 8, and also the the 3 and the 8 beat you, right? You have the third nut. The reason why I just bring that up is because people might think about like, well, if there wasn't a straight flush out there, like how often would you be betting like, you know, the queen high flush on a 4 flush run out in a given situation when it went bet call, you know, bet call. Now you face on the river with a 4 flush and you've got the queen of clubs in your hand and any king or any ace beats you. A lot of people are going to shut it down there. I'm not saying that it's always a shutdown. You can make a thin value bet, but your hand has gone from what would have been like, I mean, there were still a couple of combos, right, of straight flushes out there, but obviously it's much easier now. Your hand has gone from, if it was another club, almost the first nuts, right, to now basically the third nut. So if you're trying to figure out whether or not this is a value bet or not, I guess the question would be, I assume you're trying to get called here by the king of clubs.
Yes.
You think a lot, the king of clubs?
Yes.
The only thing that I would say in a spot like this, though, and this is usually this is actually counter to most of the advice I would give, but I think this is a very, very unique spot. It's so obvious that there's a straight flush out there that you could very easily run into a situation where if you bet and you're like, I'm planning on bet folding here, you could actually run into a situation where you could get bluffed off your hand. And that's very, very rare, where I'm saying that anyone's, because the times that, you know, you're getting bluff raised on the river are very, very small. But this situation at this level, this situation is so obvious that you're just never going to have the 3 of clubs here for the most part. Maybe like unless it's ace 3 of clubs, and you don't really fare to have the 8 of clubs here all that much unless it's 8s with the 8 of clubs or ace 8 with and then the question is, are you betting the turn like this? So if a guy can sort of figure out you just don't have an 8 or a 3 of clubs here, can't they like put you in a world of hurt in this spot?
Yes, they can. It's sort of the exploitative play I was thinking about when you talk about it is, you know, we're still playing 1-3 here and the rivers are just so under bluffed on these sorts of spots. So I thought, potentially bet fold for value, to think that if someone makes that play on me, it's sort of one of your tap the table moments. And I like you said, it's unlikely I have the 8 of clubs, but I could still have the 8 of clubs.
I'm not saying that it's against most of the population. Like I said, I'm not saying that it's bad to go with that approach, and it's one that I almost always will endorse in this particular spot. I'm just kind of pointing out that this might be one of the very, very special circumstances where even an advanced player might see, where usually they're just playing off their own hand, right? But once in a while, the board might get so scary that even a guy that usually doesn't think, oh, I have it, but you don't have it at its fundamental level, which is actually high level thought, he might be able to put this one together and be like, this guy can't have an 8 or 3 of clubs here, really, and I can have it, so I can raise him. Now, I might be giving that guy, too much credit. So a lot of people are saying bet fold in the chat. Some people are saying check call. The only time that check call here would be the play is if our opponent turned something into a bluff here that he was going to otherwise fold to a bet. So that would be like if he had king jack of hearts and he decided to bluff it. I just don't see him. I don't know. I mean, is he going to value bet? Most people aren't going to value bet the 4th nut flush on the river, which would be king of clubs X here, even if it was like an offsuit Broadway type. Sometimes people miss the straight flush and maybe they would bet the king clubs. But again, if you're at the river here.
Well, and that's my worry too, Bart, is when you're talking about if I go check and he checks and turns over the king of clubs.
Right. Right. And that's what I'm saying. And that's what I'm saying. I'm like, in order for you to check call here to it to be the right play, you have to have this guy turn like king jack of hearts into a bluff or value bet king X of clubs that would otherwise fold to a bet. I mean, those two things would have to happen here in order for it to be a check call. So I can get on board with the bet. I just wanted to point that out, that it's a special type of board. What did you do?
Well, what would you bet, Bart? Let me ask you.
God, I think it's player dependent. I think against the guy who if people remember from the flagship podcast from last week, against the guy that I bet the 8-9 with when I check raised him on Jack 10-3 and then made the bottom end of a straight on the river on a one-liner to an ace, and he snapped me off with 2 pair. If I think he's going to call with any club, I might bet 300. And I wouldn't be concerned if that guy raises me. Against some other sort of nittier guys, I might bet, smaller, maybe 150 to 200, something like that.
Okay. Yep. I bet 400. So I went larger.
400. Wow. Well, if you bet 400 here, that's probably going to decrease the bluffing frequency. 400. Now, maybe, I don't know. It's interesting because like if the king of clubs is always going to call 400 and not fold just because you look so bluffy then I guess you could make a case. I guess you could make a case for it.
Bart, do you think sets call here too or not? Because of that reason, it looks bluffy.
Well, the thing is that like if you get into a situation where you're like polarized, usually on a board like this, polarized means that you're representing a bluff, right? Or you're representing a flush. So a set can beat a bluff in this particular situation, but it's a 4 flush though. So it's quite easy for you to actually have a high club here. So, it's, another hand, is there a possibility he could end up here with like 8-8 here with no club too, which would, be a straight. So I don't know the answer to that question. I would tend to do a lot of folding here if I was your opponent with a set, if I played it this way. If you went bet, because you're just betting right into a 4 flush,
Yeah, and he jammed for his 1090 left.
Oh, wow. So the cutoff jams?
Yeah.
Well, again, I mean, I didn't even remember that it ended up happening this way. I mean, you bet so large here. I think you're almost protected by your bet sizing in this spot. I mean, it's going to be what, about 1900 600 for you to call. What, about 700 for you to call, right? So jams for
Yeah,
1090.
690. Yeah.
So 1900, 700 for you to call. So you're getting two and 3/4 to 1. You got to be good here. One out of 3.75 times. Again, I just go back to what I said. I do wonder sometimes if this board is kind of a special one where this guy might know that you don't really have a straight flush here ever, except maybe 8-8, which might not be played this way because you're sizing on the flop and the turn, and he does. So if you look at it from a theoretical MDF perspective, if you never play 8-8 this way, you probably have one of the best hands that you can possibly have here. That's kind of the paradox here, I would say, in this particular spot. You know what I'm saying? But I would still probably tend to fold when you use this type of sizing here. But you are getting 2.75 to 1. What did you do?
Yeah, so I talked it out and ended up same thing I talked about earlier, just sort of exploitatively thought I could bet big and then reduce his bluffs and then fold. I basically didn't think that there were bluffs in his range with, again, we're not playing 10-20 somewhere. We're playing 1-3. So I ended up folding, and he did not show his full hand, but he turned over the 7 of spades, and he claimed that he had pocket sevens.
7 of spades. Oh, man. I mean, that kind of points to me that he's having a bluff. I mean, is he calling with 8-7 off in the cutoff to a raise?
That's what I'm saying is, I still was trying to convince myself he had 8 of clubs, 7 of spades, even after the whole thing happened. But he claimed he had pocket sevens and turned it in bluff and said he wasn't going to win any other way.
Well, so, and again, if that's true, and like I said, you didn't tell me the result. Again, I'm just going to keep going back to what I said in the beginning, where normally you get into these spots and you bet the third nuts on the river, and it's a 4 flush board, like the equivalent of betting like the queen of clubs. This is like a really easy fold. But I had a feeling on this one that it was just one of those really, really special boards where you might actually get blown off your equity here sometimes because it's so obvious to the field player, even if he's not a high thinking player, that he can have something that you can't call with at the end. So,
yeah, like I said, I'm not 100% convinced, and I'll be interested to see what the chat says too. So could have still been a 7 of spades, 8 of clubs out there, but was a really interesting hand and one I still think about. So.
People are saying this is 7-8 off with the 8 of clubs, 100%. He had 100%. Why would he play 7-7 like this? Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. 7-7. I mean, it is, well, if the hero was truly polarized to the definition that we say, and it was polarized between like the nut flush or a bluff, there would be no reason, right, to ever raise pocket sevens, because if you raise and you're wrong, you're just costing more money. Like if the hero has a bluff and you call and you're right, you win. If you're wrong, you lose the call. But if you raise and you're wrong and he has the nuts, there's no point in doing that. But this is not quite the same thing though, because if the hero bet folds the ace of clubs, that's why you would raise pocket sevens there in that spot. So anyways, thanks for the call. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Bart.
Alrighty.